Every woman deserves to feel vibrant, safe, loved, and feel her power. The Woman's Vibrancy Code podcast is here for a potent use of your time. We will cover energy, hormones, and libido with episodes that also dive into entrepreneurship, money mindset, feminine power, and much, much more. Introducing Maraya Brown, Yale and functional medicine trained women's health expert, midwife, mom, and entrepreneur.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Women's Vibrancy Code podcast. I have a fun one for you today with Susan Bratton, who is an intimacy wellness expert and a champion and advocate for those who desire intimacy and passion their whole life long. This is a repurposed interview from Beyond the Red Tent. For those of you that have been following me since the beginning of leaving brick and mortar women's health and going into the online space, my first company was called Beyond the Red Tent. It is still a Facebook group. You are welcome to join it. And it's a great space to create collaboration across generational lines to look for solutions, mind, body, and spirit for women's health issues. Let me tell you a bit more about Susan Bratton, and let's move on with the interview. And especially for today, this is around feminine libido. So like I said, Susan Bratton is an intimacy wellness expert. She's a best-selling author and publisher of lovemaking techniques, bedroom communication skills, and sexual vitality advice, including sexual soulmates, relationship magic, revive her drive, ravish him, the steamy sex ed video collection. She also is in the realm of hormone balancing, the pump guide, and thrust in time serve as examples for the exciting variety of her 34 books and programs. So as you can see, there's a lot of content here, and I love to bring content to women specifically in the realms of energy, hormones, and libido. And so put your seatbelt on. This is one of those interviews that is not for little ears. So you'll want to grab your earbuds or potentially listen when little ears are not around. So like I said, Susan is an expert in intimate wellness, sexual regenerative protocols, and ageless sexuality. I will put her content and bios and links in the show notes, but you can find the Susan Bratton Show on betterlover.com. And you can find her at Susan Bratton on Instagram. All right, let's get the show on the road. So, Susan, how do you define what you do and how do you do it?
Well, I like to say that, first of all, we've been working on getting together for a while.
Yeah, I have to say that there was the one time we were going to do the interview and she didn't show up. Ladies, she had COVID and she's fully recovered. And look at her, she's still alive. Okay.
I was so sick from COVID, I got the day wrong in my mind. So I apologize for leaving you in the lurch, and I'm glad you have me back. What I like to do is I like to say that I transform having sex into making love. And I'm not a person that works one-on-one with people like a psychiatrist. What I am is a publisher of passionate lovemaking techniques, bedroom communication skills, because you can't have one without the other, and intimate health and wellness. How do we keep our equipment in not only great working order, but how do we take our beautiful feminine genitalia, the amazing structures that we have in our body, and fully maximize their orgasmic pleasure potential? So I'm kind of an anatomy nerd, a female and male anatomy nerd as well. So that's what I do. When I was about 40, mid-40s, my husband and I had been married about 11 years, I think it was. And I had 2 gin martinis on our anniversary and said, I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. And he said, yeah, what are we going to do about that? And I had really gotten distant from him physically. And he always wanted sex. And it felt like I was constantly trying to avoid sex. And it wasn't very good for me. It was great when we got married, but what happened, and I'll give you more of like the hindsight is 2020 part of the story, which is that I didn't know anything about my anatomy particularly. I could have an orgasm from using my vibrator, but I really couldn't have one from oral without like a ton of trying that made me feel embarrassed and exhausted. and I couldn't have an orgasm from intercourse, and I thought it was me, and I just kind of pulled away from him because I got tired of feeling like I was just, a vessel for his pleasure. He was having a great time, and he didn't really know how bad it was. And I pulled away and I pulled away and I pulled away, and it kind of ruined our marriage because when I checked out sexually, he checked out emotionally. So he was going through the motions, but we were friends living together, raising our little girl at the time who was 6 then. And we said, well, all our friends are getting divorced. We're really good friends. We love each other. Let's try and fix our sex life because that seems to be our issue. So we live in Northern California, actually. So we have at our access a lot of sex workshops. Human Awareness Institute, orgasmic meditation, ecstatic loving, tantra techniques, all of these kinds of things. And we went into therapy with a marriage therapist who said, hey, this is just what happens with marriage. You just have to kind of readjust your expectations. And he said, we're not going back to her. And then we went to another therapist who uncovered my abuses as a child and said, let's fix this because it's holding you back from having the heart connection to your sexuality. One of the reasons you're not having good sex is that you're unable to be present during lovemaking. So she worked on us, and we went to these sex workshops and we learned tons of techniques, and I started having orgasms from oral, from intercourse. It's literally just if all women can have orgasms, and lots of kinds of them, like 15 different kinds of them. If somebody just tells you how your operating system works, what you need, and what the map to the territory looks like. And I said to my husband, we've had such a renaissance in our relationship. Now we're having sex way better than when we first got together, during the honeymoon period when all the hormones are flowing. And I want to devote the rest of my life to teaching people how to transform having sex into making love. Heart-connected, conscious lovemaking that is not the patriarchal way of having sex, but the matriarchal way. Because if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, right? Oh,
Here's
yeah.
to that.
And so it really is about being in service to the goddess, allowing the goddess to flow and surrender and just sink into massive amounts of ever-expanding pleasure with simple techniques. It's not hard. And you can have massive breakthroughs at any age. And it's literally a matter, I like things that are like profound awarenesses, something where you thought about it this way, and then you heard this thing and you're like, dude, yeah, I'm doing this instead. It's like that instant change that can be possible to create an incredibly better life for yourself. And in this case, an incredibly better sex life. So that's the story of how I've gotten here 15 years later, 34 books, a dozen programs, thousands of articles, hundreds of videos, and hundreds, well, millions at this point of followers whose lives I am so honored to have made better in the bedroom.
A lot of women's orgasms.
Yeah. And men's.
So often I interact with women where they don't talk about this. And it's like, ladies, we have to talk about this. Let me tell you, first of all, there are great health benefits to anti-aging. You want to talk about anti-aging? Let's talk about orgasm. So on to the next question, because I love what you mentioned around kind of the female versus the male, the characteristics of feminine versus masculine. And I'll never forget one of the podcasts I heard you interviewed on, and you talked about the 20 minutes to female engorgement. Yeah. There was like a major light bulb that went off for me. Right. That makes so much sense. So will you talk a little bit about feminine versus masculine? And if it's okay, would you share that whole 20-minute engorgement piece?
Yes. Yeah. So imagine a banana, just a plain old yellow banana with a little stem. If you look at the erectile tissue in a man's penis, 50% of the banana is sticking out of his body, and 50% of the banana is actually sticking in his body. His penis actually looks like a tongue. It comes up and out of his body like this. It's crazy. It's like the second tongue. And that whole tongue has chambers of spongy erectile tissue. And when he gets turned on, they fill with blood and he gets an erection. We women have the same banana of erectile tissue, the same amount of erectile tissue, only Just the stem is sticking out. All the rest of that banana's worth of erectile tissue is actually inside, and it's actually two beautiful cuffs of tissue surrounding our vaginal canal. So when we think about, oh, we've got to stimulate the clitoris, well, that little nub that we can maybe see, because some girls are showers and some girls are growers too. Sometimes with enough stimulation, we can get a little clitoral erection, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. All of the good buried treasure is inside the vulva. The vulva is all the stuff, the urogenital system of the woman, including the outside. And just in a nutshell, to make it simple, you have a clitoral head. That's where all the nerve endings are, but it's not actually erectile tissue. The shaft of your clitoris is erectile tissue. It devolves into two little arms called crura that drape over the opening to your vagina. It has two legs called vestibular bulbs that look like little punching bags that are underneath the fur on both sides of the opening of your vagina. And right underneath the clitoral stalk, the shaft, is this funny little long tube of erectile tissue that looks like one of those pool noodles the kids play with in the pool, one of those extruded foam noodles. It runs the length of your urethral canal. That's where your urinary system is. Enters from your bladder, drops into this canal, and comes out above your vagina and below your clitoris. That's the area where you evacuate your urine. It's got a beautiful spongy tissue that runs up from the outside all the way up along the roof of your vagina. That's your G spot, but it's not a spot. It's a whole area. It's the G area, which is the top. And then you have the bottom of your vagina has something called the perineal sponge. It's this little spongy brain looking thing. It kind of looks like a prostate. And it's at the base of the vagina between the vaginal and rectum canals. And that's erectile tissue. So if a woman rushes and she doesn't get her entire banana filled with blood and she has intercourse too fast, she's going to be unable to come from intercourse. She's going to struggle. All that tissue is kind of up inside. It likes touching, massage, mouth, fingers, hands, stimulation, toys, tools to get it fully engorged. And so what happens for most women is that they think in their mind, I'm just not the kind of woman who can have an orgasm from intercourse. When in fact, every woman is the kind of woman to have an orgasm from intercourse. She's just rushed because she thinks she should be ready when he is. The minute he's got an erection, he's ready to go because he's testosterone, ready to go, goal-oriented. This is what you see in all the movies. He just throws her down and enters her, And so too many couples go through life rushing her turn on. And that's why so much of what I teach people across the gender spectrum is about this notion of engorgement. And by the time you're 50, you have half the ability to generate blood flow to your pelvis as you did when you were in your 20s, because your nitric oxide systems decline. And so you need to keep supporting your nitric oxide production so you get the vasodilation to send the blood flow to your pelvis so that you can get engorged and lubricated. Because the other issue is that your vagina doesn't have any lubrication, any natural lubrication of its own. It doesn't have glands, is what I want to say. It doesn't have glands that lubricate. Your lubrication comes from your blood plasma coming down into your pelvic bowl and the fluid seeping through the vaginal mucosal system, the lining. That's exactly how you also have female ejaculatory orgasms, because that urethral sponge has Skene's glands in it, and the blood comes in, brings the watery fluid that goes into the urethral sponge and then comes out the urethra, and also fluid can come out of the vagina. So all women have the ability to have these ejaculatory orgasms, which are very cleansing, very healthy, very good for you, very nurturing, emotionally releasing, as well as vaginal orgasms without even touching the tip of the clit, because it's all clitoral structure in there. You just have to get it engorged. So that's my little soapbox on why engorgement, why 20 minutes, why foreplay, why matriarchal, not patriarchal.
It's such an important conversation. We have a little bit of shock value today, and this is an important conversation to be having amongst women. This is an important part of who we are as women and how we express ourselves. And I love the Outlander series, but it sounds like it's a little unrealistic. I mean, I work with women in their 50s, 60s, and they're like, it just never worked for me. Well, let's talk about this.
It was interesting to me, Maraya, that you had to take a moment there and take a gulp and, say, oh, if you're freaked out, don't worry, just come back to it. What was it that I said that made you feel like you needed to say that? Because I remember when I first started talking about sexuality, I got a lump in my throat. And I always say that my superpower is courage. The courage to stand for orgasmic potential and lovership and connection in couples. And I can remember feeling embarrassed about talking about it now. But now for me, as you can see, it's like falling off a log. I'm very, very comfortable with it and passionate about it. But where did you get caught as I was talking to you? Where did you feel like, oh, maybe this is too much? Because I feel like it's anatomy. Like it doesn't even seem like it's anything bad, but
absolutely. And as a women's health provider, every pap smear I ever do, I give a woman a mirror and I explain her, I help her understand her anatomy, and she gets to see her own cervix. And in the course that I run, I'm talking with women about all of this stuff and to acknowledge the variety that can be. Not all women are ready for it now. And my hope is that they stay open, particularly, you're right, using the word vulva and urethra and clitoral hood and perineum. Those are all basic anatomical words that should be able to be expressed freely. Now, maybe you don't want to share them when your children are in an earshot. I mean, I think that that's totally up to an individual, but amongst women, to be able to talk about this feels very important to me. And it's one of the reasons why we have worked so hard to find that day and time to have you here so that you can be you, because you share it so unapologetically in a way that I think is really important for women to go, you're right. This is a conversation that we need to have. Okay, I've got another question for you, Susan. Can we talk a little bit around this transition through perimenopause and menopause, specifically for the women who say, I don't have the same sensation down there. I'm struggling with vaginal dryness. I'm struggling with vaginal pain. It hurts to have sex. I can't reach orgasm anymore. I've been told that I just have to go on hormones and that's my only solution as I transition through this chapter of my life. Or I've also spoken with women that almost are on the brink of just giving up. And they come to me saying, I haven't been intimate with my partner in months, even years. And I know that you have solutions around this area. Would you shine some light on this phenomenon for women, between, say, age 45 and beyond?
I've really studied that a lot because it's the three legs of the stool. You've got to understand sex techniques. You have to understand what you're going for. You have to, okay, I haven't been able to have an orgasm from clitoral stimulation, or I haven't been able to have one from orgasm, or I've never had a G-spot orgasm, or I've never ejaculated, or whatever it might be. I want to have, whatever, all the different kinds of orgasmic experiences there are. Or I'm afraid to talk to my partner. I'm afraid that I'll hurt his ego. If it's a male-bodied partner, it's often male, female, and she's afraid to have him contract. So she kind of suffers through it. Or she says, I don't know what I want, but I know what I have isn't it. How do I find what I want? And so I teach her how to understand that every day is different and what she wanted yesterday isn't the same as today, and to really, really listen to your body wisdom, and to teach your partner to love, to know what your body needs so that your partner can win. But that third piece, that sexual health piece, is the third leg of that very solid sexuality stool, which is our yonis. And you probably use yoni a fair amount. Yoni is a tantric word for the overall female genital system. And lingam is the word for the masculine system, the penis and associated parts. And the yoni, the penis is delicate too. Don't think that it's not. It has a lot of issues that it has to contend with, but not as many as our yoni. And so what I realized was that I could give people all of the techniques in the world. I could teach them how to feel really comfortable in the bedroom, having any conversation that needed to be said, all the way into how to have really hot pillow talk and things like that. But that if I didn't address painful sex and all of its associated issues, post-childbirth traumas, as well as lubrication, incontinence, thinning walls, lack of sensation, diminished orgasmic sensation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I would not be supporting people fully. And so that's where I really started getting into the simple things you can do to make your yoni feel good again so you like sex. And then that gets to the third piece of this, which is libido, desire, and arousal, and how to think about them as like a Venn diagram, the three pieces that work together. I think it's really important to understand that our arousal pattern in a female body is the opposite of the arousal pattern in the male body. And if we don't explain what we need, if we don't understand what we need and explain to our partner, we end up in working in the male arousal pattern, the patriarchal view of sex, which does us a terrible disservice as lovers. And so that is another thing that I try to dispel with women, is that you're not getting what you need to get turned on. If you're not turned on, I can tell you how to fix it. And one of them is, the answer isn't your hormones are broken. That is what a lot of women think. And I love bioidentical hormone replacement. I'm 59 years old and I had a period this month. So I am very much a person who believes in bioidentical hormone replacement. I take estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, and oxytocin. But that's not what keeps me wanting sex. So I like to tell women how to figure out and unlock that puzzle too. There's a number of different issues. You have to identify what it is that's holding you back. For some women, it's body shame or other shame, sexual shame, religious shame, societal shame, cultural shame, shame from partners, betrayals. It could be physical issues as well, such as painful sex, from anything from episiotomies to lack of lubrication. So you look at, okay, what exactly hurts? And then let's fix that. So you identify where is it the pain hurts right at the entrance to my vagina. It feels like broken glass. Okay, that's a totally different thing than my vagina is lax and I can't feel anything when my partner penetrates me. It's not that it hurts, it's that it doesn't feel like anything's happening. So like there's a big range of those issues. And then we talked about it earlier, the lubrication piece, which is, are you hydrated enough? Do you have enough estrogen? And if you don't want to do bioidentical hormone replacement, can you look at natural solutions like DHA and other things like that, as well as topicals, and getting your blood flowing to your genitals using a nitric oxide supplement, which I make one that I make specifically because it really works for midlife and older women. So how do you get the flow happening again? Another issue could be self-pleasuring. That self-pleasuring is a fantastic way, and there's so many good tools. Self-pleasuring so that you begin to feel desire builds on itself. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Once you start having orgasms, if you did a 30-day orgasm challenge and you gave yourself an orgasm every possible day you could bring yourself to do it for a month, you'd find that you start thinking about sex again. You want sex more often, and you are more lubricated, more turned on, more in your body. So those are good ways to kickstart things as well. Those are just some examples of the kinds of things that you'd look at when you're thinking about libido, because libido is based in health and the function of your body, both mentally and physically.
I love the libido conversation because, there was a part of me when you were talking about vaginal lubrication and the anatomy. And then in my mind, I'm thinking, what about the women that don't even go there because they don't have the initial arousal in the first place to even want to be touched, whether they're postpartum or they're in their 40s or 50s. And it sounds like, I love this idea of the 30-day challenge, like the whole concept of we crave what we eat.
Yeah.
We think more of the thoughts that go into our mind, whether you believe in law of attraction or prayer, whatever it may be, start by exploring your own body and self-pleasuring, and watch how the desire builds. And I do want to hear more about the supplements specifically. I love the whole nitric oxide conversation, even around perimenopause, menopause, and anxiety. I'm hearing more there, but specifically around libido.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about the supplements, how they were developed? We've got the links up above if anybody wants to order them, and any other advice for women that they're not even ready right now for their genitalia or breasts to be touched. Maybe they are just trying to figure out how to even create desire in their partnership to start. Anything there?
Yeah. And I would also say that generally there are more women who are bored than there are who have a low libido. You hear about the low libido stories because women are willing to admit that they don't feel any desire, that they just don't feel turned on. They don't feel sexual. Sexual things don't come to their mind. But I would wager to say that most women actually are just not really happy with their sex life. And that's why they don't have a libido. It's not actually anything particularly physical. It's often boredom and the lack of their partner's skills. And you'd say, well, oh, okay, you can just blame it on their partner. No, believe me, I am a massive champion of the masculine and what he brings to the bedroom, or your feminine partner. And I'm also very highly supportive of gender spectrum and gender fluidity. More and more women as they age are having girlfriends now. That's a huge trend. So I don't want to say that, but what I do want to say is that often boredom leads to lack of desire. And when couples begin to play again, when they are romancing each other, when they're cuddling, when they're touching, when they're holding each other, when they're giving each other sensual massages and erotic massages, without this goal of intercourse, because again, that is the patriarchal perspective is, oh, well, I have an erection and I want to stick it in. And if that happens 472,000 times in your relationship and not a lot of other things happen, like learning new pleasuring and stimulating techniques, learning oral pleasuring techniques, learning manual massage techniques, enjoying dressing up for each other and sexy dancing for each other, making love in different positions and different places. When all of that goes out the window, when you're afraid to bring toys into the bedroom because somebody's feelings are going to get hurt, you're leaving massive amounts of fun and pleasure on the table. And once a couple says, boy, our sex life is boring, let's do something different, then you start getting creative and you find that your libido's not gone. She was just asleep.
It's such
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's bored whether you're 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even 80s,
90s.
90s.
Yes, I have many, many people in my fan base who are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s and having great sex.
And when she says fan base, 450,000, 550,000, we're talking about a lot of women that follow Susan.
Men and women. People
Men and
across
women.
the gender spectrum.
Thank you. We're very blessed to have you here with us. What about the supplements? So for women that are looking for, okay, I want something tangible to start with. Give me a happy pill. Give me a magic pill.
Yeah. Well, this is called Flow, and this is my blood flow supplement. And the reason that I created it is that I did research into libido and I found out, oh, it's not your hormones. It's that can be a problem if you have painful, thinning vaginal tissue. But once you start getting blood flow back to your genitals, that often goes away even without hormone replacement therapy. So one of the things that's really important is that there's two different main types of blood flow supplementation. One is arginine and the other is citrulline. Citrulline's made of watermelon. Arginine is actually made as a chemical production. And when you're older, you can't convert arginine very well. Anybody over 40, arginine's not going to do much for you. Citrulline, and this is made from, and I wanted an organic product. I didn't want to be taking stuff that was made out of corn syrup with sprayed in pesticides in Chinese cornfields, which is almost 99% of what's out in the market. Beetroot is good as well, but it's hard to find organic beetroot. So I made mine with citrulline, organic citrulline from watermelon and organic spinach, as well as something called pine bark, which actually is a tannin that increases blood flow. and really good for blood flow to the brain. So when you start to have CRS syndrome, can't remember stuff, and you start to have dysbiosis, and you start to have lack of lubrication, and you start to have numb fingers and toes and nose, you're looking at cardiovascular lack of blood flow. Your blood flow is the oxygen that brings life to your body, including your yoni. And women tell me that sometimes even taking 2 capsules a day is a little too much for them. Smaller women, they only take 1 a day. And they begin to feel lubricated again when they start getting good blood flow. And when women feel lubricated, they feel more turned on. If a woman's yoni is dry, tight, or overly lax, and she just doesn't have the solidness and the blood flow and the velvetiness that she used to have in her vaginal mucosa, she doesn't want anything in there. It doesn't feel good. But when it's lush and rich and engorged and there's good blood flow and good lubrication, she just feels more turned on. So that's what flow is. And then I created a vitamin line with the 3 most well-researched on humans clinical data. This is a 90-day system where you take 1 botanical each month with your vitamin mineral complex. It's a vitamin, it's like a 1 a day with a little something more. 1 is Tribulus terrestris, 1 is Tongkat Ali, and 1 is fenugreek. And they are all both things that have our ancestors, the indigenous wisdom of the ages of people who've always wanted to feel sexier. This is nothing new. This problem of wanting more libido is something that humans have wanted and had throughout history. The more that we feel sexually excited and desired and desirable, the more we have not just a lust, but a lust for life. Our creativity is in our yoni. That is the birthplace of and the seat of our passion and zest. And so when things aren't moving down there, when we don't feel desire, our life is a little bit lower. And that's why I think these 2 things, I wouldn't give you libido supplements without a vitamin mineral, because you need vitamins and minerals. You need your D, you need your C, you need your E, you need your A, you need boron, you need magnesium, you need selenium. These are the little things that actually make your hormones decouple from the proteins. So they're not bound, they're free, so you can actually utilize them. And so that's why I created a simple system that was just these 2 things that work synergistically together to improve the physical desire that you can experience.
That's awesome. Well, what a conversation. Juicy, push some boundaries, push some envelopes, some quick fix possibilities. And Susan, just wanted to say thank you again for your time. I know that you live a productive life, and many women, I'm sure, are feeling encouraged. Particularly, thank you for sharing your story about your own marriage. And may we all remember that to be turned on, to feel turned on by our life, our lover, and ourselves, to feel passionate and sensual and sultry and sexual in our experience of our own bodies and our relationships and our careers and our life, it all trickles over and bubbles over to creating a vibrant life. And so thank you for the work that you do. I know that it's not always an easy message to share out in the world where censorship can be a thing. And so I'm trusting that those that have received this message are exactly those that needed to receive it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being present. Thank you for continuing to chime in on the Women's Vibrancy Code. Please follow us. Please offer positive feedback, 5-star reviews, and look forward to seeing you or having you hear me as well as the guests that are coming down the road within the Women's Vibrancy Code and beyond. Cheers to all of us feeling turned on by our life, our lover, and ourselves. And thanks again, Susan.
Thank you for listening to the Women's Vibrancy Code. Connect with us and take the first step to transforming your energy, hormones, and libido at thewomensvibrancycode.com. Cheers to your zest and vitality. Make sure to follow for weekly power-packed value.